Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, so in this video, I'd like to talk about Ruby Franke's recent plea agreement. Okay, just 3 days ago on the 18th of December, Ruby Franke entered a change of plea. She entered a guilty plea to 4 counts out of a 6-count criminal information.
Ms. Franke, how do you plead to count 1, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
To count 3, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
To count 5, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
But most importantly, this plea agreement is part of an obvious strategy. Okay, this is an obvious defense strategy. Okay, to basically throw Jodi Hildebrandt under the bus. Okay, what I mean by that is that very clearly and very openly, Ruby Franke, as part of this plea agreement, she is agreeing to testify truthfully against Jodi Hildebrandt in exchange for a very powerful counter promise on the part of the state of Utah, where the state of Utah is promising to remain neutral in any future parole board proceedings. Okay, so what this basically means is that Ruby Franke is not going to get any opposition if she applies early for parole. Okay, so whatever sentence she gets, at some point, a very early fraction in whatever sentence she gets, she's going to be able to go to the parole board and, present evidence of rehabilitation, and basically at a minimum be able to serve the rest of her sentence maybe outside of prison. Okay, so basically this is very powerful because now the state, as long as she testifies truthfully against Jodi Hildebrandt, the state really can't do anything to prevent her from getting a very early parole. So because early parole is the main defense strategy here, what we're going to hear right from the beginning, we're going to hear this big theme of rehabilitation. Okay, so now we understand why the defense has basically counseled Ruby, and Ruby has agreed to express a lot of remorse and contrition as much as possible. Okay, because basically what the theme here is that she's not going to defend against the charges so much as she is going to focus on, hey, I'm not really such a bad person. I'm rehabilitating, and pointing the finger at Jodi Hildebrandt. Okay, so if we look at let's say her behavior in court, she makes an extra statement that wasn't necessary, where she expresses this supposedly this very deep remorse for what happened.
And to count 6, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
With my deepest regret and sorrow for my family and my children, guilty.
So her law firm was very careful in conjunction with this change of plea, okay, with this guilty plea, to produce a public statement on behalf of Ruby, okay, basically explaining that Ruby is not such a bad person, okay, basically explaining that systematically Jodi Hildebrandt had sort of isolated Ruby and had basically distorted her morals, okay, had distorted her personal ethics, okay, and that now that Ruby has had a few months in jail to sort of reflect on her situation, she's basically reset her moral compass, and now she has a full appreciation for everything she did wrong. And that is basically, I'm sorry, that's the setup for basically early parole, right? So that's basically the defense strategy. They're going to go ahead and take what looks like a big hit, okay, and also they're going to do this funny thing where they're going to pretend like they stipulate to consecutive sentences.
And there's an agreement about the 4 counts running consecutive.
That is correct.
Parties cannot parties can stipulate to whatever they want, but a stipulation is not binding on a judge. Okay, so the judge doesn't have to accept anything that's stipulated by the parties. Okay, especially in terms of sentencing. The sentencing is the province of the judge, the judiciary. The judge is the one who makes the sentence. So the parties can stipulate to whatever they want, but the judge is also bound by law that he cannot impose a sentence that's longer than necessary. Okay, that's just a basic rule of American criminal law. A judge cannot impose a sentence that's longer than necessary. So the judge may take their stipulation, right? But the judge is not bound by it. Okay, and in fact, if we look carefully at the actual plea agreement, it actually acknowledges that even though they stipulate to consecutive sentences, they actually acknowledge that the judge is not bound by that. Okay, so the judge is going to sentence her, to whatever he wants to. He may make the first count, since that's the most serious count. It involves torture. Okay, he may make that one consecutive to the other ones. Okay, but the other ones may run concurrent. Okay, just because the judge is not bound by any stipulation. But regardless of what sentence she gets, okay, the strategy is clearly they're going to go for early parole. Okay, that's what they're going for. And so they have to set up the theory that Ruby's really not such a bad person. And that really all of this is basically Jodi Hildebrandt's fault. Okay, that if Ruby wasn't isolated by Jodi Hildebrandt, and if she wasn't influenced by Jodi Hildebrandt, she wouldn't be this kind of person that starves her kids or tortures her kids. Okay. But I'm sorry, when I look at the record in this case, okay, when I look at, let's say, videos from before when Ruby was actually, let's say, in partnership with Jodi Hildebrandt, okay, I see a pattern. I see a pattern from even before the partnership with Jodi Hildebrandt, where Ruby seems to have kind of like a habit of withholding food from her children, and even kind of just being sort of sadistic with her children, right? So let's take a look at that.
I'm only going to say it one more time, and then you're going to lose the privilege to eat dinner. I just got a text message from Eve's teacher, and she said that Eve did not pack a lunch today, and can I bring a lunch over to the school? This happens quite often when you're raising children, because I know that her teacher is uncomfortable with her being hungry and not having a lunch.
Here it's really spectacular how she has this sweet voice, and she's trying so hard to be diplomatic and talking about whether people are comfortable in this sweet muffin sweet tone. And it's like at the same time she's being really sadistic. Okay, so that right there, is that a cognitive dissonance, or is that a cognitive fragmentation, right? And I think that's very important. I think we're not dealing with cognitive dissonance. I think we're dealing with a fragmented mind. But it's interesting how this is very similar to Lori Vallow, how she could be like in the aftermath of having her husband killed, Charles Vallow, and she is just lolly, happy-go-lucky, just cheerful. Check out this.
Like, he would have swung it backwards at me, not frontwards.
Okay, yeah.
He was a professional baseball player.
Okay.
So it wasn't a good idea for Tyler to get out of that.
Probably not the.
I mean, he played semi-pro.
Yeah.
He was, yeah.
Like, ha ha ha. Like, I wonder how the police really felt doing that interview. I wonder if the police was actually like hypnotized by that. I'll never know. I mean, I guess the police, they have to kind of like empathize a little bit when they're trying to do an interview. But the bottom line is, when you see somebody who has a completely incongruous, a completely inappropriate affect, okay, in the face of what is really something else. Okay, here Lori is coming out of doing something extremely sadistic, like homicidal, right? Likewise, what Ruby's doing is very damaging. Okay, I mean, she's talking about depriving food, and it's a habit for her. It's like a go-to for her, where she's like depriving food from people. And it's just so effortless that you wonder, it's not a cognitive dissonance. I think she's just fragmented. I think the part of her that thinks she's being really nice and really diplomatic and really sweet is completely dissociated from the part of her that is actually sadistic, right? So let's keep watching.
And it would ease her discomfort if I came to the school with lunch. But I responded and just said, Eve is responsible for making her lunches in the morning, and she actually told me she did pack a lunch.
Also, how can you not notice how comfortable Ruby seems here? Ruby seems very comfortable when she's talking about other people being uncomfortable. Okay, now it's funny, that's almost like one of the wicked witch techniques, like really wicked witchcraft, is enjoying my comfort while you're uncomfortable. That's like a power play, right? People do that as a power play. And I think that I'd like to think that I don't think we deliberately do that. I think that's because there must be some like fragmentation, like some dissociation, where we're able to actually feel very comfortable while we're talking about other people being very uncomfortable. And it's almost like the more we know other people are comfortable, the more we sort of like bask in our comfort, And I know people think it's like, that's like a sick witchcraft, but I think there may be some dissociation there where you just are dissociated from discomfort. And so you're just enjoying your comfort while you're in a contrast, you're looking at other people being uncomfortable. But I think the problem is, I don't know if Ruby understands how enraging that can be when you're treated in a condescending way, where somebody is like displaying, like really displaying and really basking in their comfort while they're pointing at you being uncomfortable. So That's really interesting. But I do think this is actually at the root of this, I think, is some kind of dissociation.
So the natural outcome is she's just going to need to be hungry. And hopefully nobody gives her food and nobody steps in and gives her a lunch.
So while I do believe that Jodi Hildebrandt was a bad influence on Ruby, clearly, okay, Jodi Hildebrandt basically sort of put like gasoline on what Ruby already was, okay. I still think that the defense has gotten a fantastic deal out of this, okay, because now the state cannot oppose any efforts to get early probation, right? The state has to just basically just stand neutral. And Ruby Franke's attorneys have now made it so that effectively there's no way to really inquire and to challenge Ruby as to how she was prior to her partnership with Jodi Hildebrandt. So basically, Ruby has effectively just taken herself out of scrutiny. Okay. Now I'm sure there are ways that scrutiny can be applied. I mean, I don't know if maybe the state of Utah can oppose an early probation, but maybe the actual probation officers, maybe they could like recommend some psych exam or something. But bottom line is that a lot of scrutiny has been taken off Ruby Franke, okay, for basically what I think are signs that she may be a pretty sick person, okay, and I believe she has a pretty serious personality disorder. So basically, the defense has worked it out so that now basically any real scrutiny as to how she used to be prior to being with Jodi Hildebrandt is to a very large degree sort of taken off the table, okay. And so I think that was very effective on the part of defense. And I think at this point, it's kind of almost like an injustice in the sense that, you know, I really personally think, just having looked at all the, you know, the videos from before the partnership with Jodi Hildebrandt, I really think that Ruby Franke really is kind of a disturbing person. And I think capable of a lot of sadistic behavior or sadistic treatment of other people. And I think that is definitely in the range of a narcissistic personality disorder, probably with some pretty strong antisocial features, or at least capable of being sadistic, you know, sadism, basically. So, you know, and I think she has a lot of like dissociative mental issues where she just doesn't even have contact with the vicious part of herself. She sort of lives in this very sweet, very, very kind of perfect, just everything is like, just like candy sweet, this sort of delicious world of like the Mormon suburban utopia where she just feels like this ideal person and she doesn't even feel the actual sadistic parts of herself.
Then that was 7 months ago. Maybe you need longer without a bedroom. If you cut one more thing in my house,
We're chopping its head off.
I'm going to take the scissors, look at me, and I'm going to cut its head off. Abby, we took the phone away from Abby in November. And you may never get the phone back.
Probably not.
But what you guys didn't know was Chad didn't get any room. He didn't get anything. He was sleeping on the floor in the family room.
And I noticed a very similar affectation with Lori Vallow. Okay, I just showed a clip before where Lori Vallow is kind of being like the joking, kind of like using joking as like her way of dissociating from her own sadism. But Lori Vallow also has that sort of sweet muffin, ideal Mormon woman voice or whatever that, like it's like she's tasting the most delicious muffin as she vocalizes her words. And it's sort of like she uses this like voice as a way of sort of reaffirming how utopian of a person she is, how perfect she is. And so let's listen to Lori do the same thing.
But you felt that in his presence, but did you also feel like, what are like some of his personality traits? Because I'm interested in like, obviously he was powerful, but like a calm power, or what are your ideas of his personality traits?
And there it's really interesting what Lori's doing, because she's doing what I've seen with a lot of fundamentalist Christians. Okay, a lot of fundamentalist Christians in their theology of the apocalypse, the second coming, there is this kind of this theological, it's a theory, really. I mean, nobody really knows, but there's a theory that Jesus was really nice in the New Testament, but when he comes back in the second coming, he's going to be this powerful like killer Jesus, you know, basically. I'm sorry, but you know, it's my own words, but basically a killer Jesus, like a destroyer Jesus, you know, this super powerful, but powerful in a very sadistic, like the sadistic Jesus, you know. And that is, that's kind of a theme that runs not just in Mormonism, but in a lot of fundamentalist Christianity. This idea that, if you read Revelations, you're going to see another side to Jesus, that when he comes back, it's no more lovey-dovey nice guy like in the New Testament. But I think what's hard for a lot of Christians is to actually sort of integrate these two opposites, sort of the ideal of the very sweet Christian, the perfect ideal sort of utopian Christian. You can't be nicer than me. I'm at like 100% nice. You can't be nicer than me. It's almost like impossible. You can't beat it, right? This like super nice version of Christianity, and then this kind of like underlying theme of a contrasting sadism, like a sadistic Christianity, this really harsh, like killer Christianity, like merciless side of Christianity. And even though a lot of fundamentalists and a lot of Mormons, really do believe in this like harsher Jesus, this more sadistic side to like say Christian justice, it still hasn't completely been integrated into their personalities. I find that I think a lot of Christian people, they're so invested in being like, you can't be nicer than me. Like we're like the world champions of niceness, that they somehow they believe in this more sadistic justice, right? But they have it sort of like dissociated so that it's still in them, but it's sort of like ejected from their own consciousness, so that all they feel is like muffin sweet, but they don't actually feel the sadism that is actually also part of their theology. But of course, there are let's say the fire and brimstone Christians. Okay, so there are Christians who don't have any trouble saying, hey man, you're going to go to hell for that, right? You're going to go to hell. And they're kind of tough, right? But I think maybe for some women, not all women, but I think for some women, I think they just get so invested in the idea that, hey, I'm just the champion of sweetness, right? I'm the champion of sweetness, that all the fire and brimstone is somewhere else, right? It's in them, but it's kind of like ejected from their consciousness, right? So I think that's kind of like what's happening, I think, with Ruby Franke and also with Lori Vallow, okay? But I think that when you already have, let's say, a tendency towards narcissism, okay? And in my opinion, I'm just going to say my theory. My theory is that narcissism is essentially at the bottom. Narcissism is a complete inability to tolerate incompatible ideas, okay, or incompatible points of view, right? So that, let's say, on the one hand, I think I'm a wonderful person, right? But on the other hand, there's other incompatible realities. Okay. Oh, well, in some ways I'm really not so wonderful, right? But if you can't hold those incompatibles together, you're just going to eject one from your consciousness and you're going to blow up the other one, right? So you're going to blow up the one that has you being a good person, and then you just eject all the ideation and all the considerations that maybe you're not so great, right? So you end up with this like inflated, you appear to be inflated with like a very polarized sense of yourself and of other people, right? So essentially, if you already have a tendency towards narcissism, you're going to have a lot of difficulty containing sort of incompatible ideas, right? And so you're going to end up sort of repelling sort of the disgusting ideas and only holding the beautiful, right? But it's a false ejection, because even though you eject, like say, your own sadism, your own hostility, right, and you just think you're lovely and sweet, you're ejecting it from your consciousness. But you're not ejecting it from who you are. It's just ejected from your consciousness so you don't feel it. Okay, so it's the illusion of dissociation. You dissociate things, but by dissociating, you think you've gotten rid of it, but really it's become more powerful. Okay, so in a sense, for somebody like Ruby Franke, her sadistic aspects are actually more powerful because she's ejected them through dissociation from her actual consciousness. So to me, it's fascinating how when Ruby Franke actually went and became a partner at Connections with Jodi Hildebrandt, it's amazing to me that Jodi Hildebrandt actually helped Ruby discover that she does have kind of a fragmented sort of, I would say, like dissociated, kind of like broken into pieces kind of personality, where she's sort of like split off from like other parts of herself. This is fascinating. Watch this clip.
I was a hugely disconnected, selfish, aggressive, neglectful mother. I love principles more than my child. Yikes. That's a really, and that is the truth.
And to me, this is so sad, because here she is, maybe just by accident. Ruby, by accident, is actually putting her finger on the fact that she's disconnected. Okay. and that she somehow is ending up like loving her principles and her values more than her children, right? But I don't think they really put their finger on the fact that she's a split person, okay? That the part of her that loves her children and has normal human feelings is sort of like split off from this other part that is like this runaway sadistic, merciless kind of, I don't know if it's a Christian thing. I think in a way it does come from Christianity, but I think some people have their own sadism, okay? And I think the Christian theology just puts gasoline on it, depending on how their personality is set up and how the Christian theology is actually taught to them. But I think it's interesting how Ruby had an opportunity here to notice how she is really a disconnected and split person. But I don't think she's able to fully understand how that cashes out into effectively being a narcissistic person. But, it's funny because she'll just come right out and admit, and she sort of tracks the language of sort of like confessing that she's narcissistic.
I wanted my kids to be happy, which AKA translated into, I want my kids to get off my back because I want to do what I want to do. I want to be able to go to Target. I want to be able to shop. I want to be able to have a moment of silence where I can just think. It was all about me. And I made my kids responsible for that.
But I don't think she really puts together exactly the part about being disconnected, being sort of dissociated from parts of herself. I think that part, they sort of touch on it in the language, but I don't think it really sinks in. And so then as we see more videos from Jodi Hildebrandt, we see that Jodi Hildebrandt is not about bringing all kinds of irreconcilable ideation into the consciousness, okay? Jodi Hildebrandt is not about bringing all the messy contrasts of life and having it reside and sit within one's conscious existence, okay? Jodi Hildebrandt is actually all about ejecting the distortion and only embracing pure white sugar truth, right? And so unfortunately, I think while Jodi is able to kind of put her finger on things, I think Jodi Hildebrandt doesn't, I think in my opinion, I think she fails to understand that we actually become richer when we have more contrasting and maybe even chaotic and sort of incompatible ideation and feelings held within ourselves. That actually makes us stronger. And when we try to purify our experience by ejecting all the chaos, ejecting all the distortion, and only embracing pure white sugar or purity, we're actually going to get worse. We're actually going to get worse. And so in a sense, you're going to become like, what that'll do is that'll put Ruby on steroids, where she was already a very polarized, very kind of like dissociated person, where she was only embracing this kind of like utopian perfection, right? And so now Jodi Hildebrandt is giving her like a turbocharged version of utopian perfection, where we're just going to be all about truth, all about truth. And so what's going to happen is Ruby's going to go right back. She's going to go right back to embracing principles over her actual human feelings towards her children. And she's going to get wrapped up into this ideology of like, truth over distortion. And she's going to become even worse. Okay. And just check out this one clip. It's amazing.
You wonder where I've been on my vlogs. You wonder why I left YouTube. It's to save my kids. No amount of money. I'm telling you, I was making millions. And I left it because my kids were being hurt. With entitlement, they were being hurt. With people's advice, and they didn't have a mother up the front saying, I don't care what the world's opinion is. This is the truth, and this is where I stand. And fortunately, I had a chance. I had them in my home long enough to do it, and I'm not going to lose them. They're seeing truth. They're accepting truth. They're loving truth. And so this is my passion, is to invite you to stand in truth and put your opinions to the side for a minute, because your kids are the target of distortion.
So unfortunately, now Ruby was worse than ever. Okay, for whatever reason, Jodi Hildebrandt got her to a place of just a little bit of insight, and then she just took her into an even worse place, where now she's got this like truth versus distortion thing going. And now Ruby's going to be more militant than ever, and she already has that narcissistic tendency. And now she's just going to be more severe, and I think more committed than ever to like this very split existence. Okay. And all I have to say is that, I kind of hey, we can't fault the defense. The defense gave her a great defense, and I think she got a fantastic deal. My prediction is whatever prison sentence she gets. I don't care if she gets she'll probably get a prison sentence of like 7 years or 10 years, something like that. I don't know, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. But let's just say she gets a sentence between 7 and 10 years, right? But she's not going to get a lot of opposition when she applies for parole. Okay, so she's probably going to get out early on parole. And basically, life is just going to go on. And I think she'll probably get a parole probably within like, I don't know, maybe as early as 3 years or, who knows, but like she may not do that much prison time. Right. And so in the end, I don't know that Ruby's really going to have a chance to address the real problem that she's had. And I don't know that, living in Utah where, she's going to have all these resources to just find more, I think maybe more Mormon resources, Unfortunately, I don't know that Ruby's ever going to discover what I think could maybe help her, which is maybe for her to try to take in more of the ugly and the disgusting subject matter of life, the imperfection, the fact that maybe her children do have trouble telling the truth, or maybe she's not teaching her kids very fast, or her kids maybe are not learning as fast as they should, or they're not as obedient as she wants them to be. And just to take in all the shortcomings and the imperfections and just all the things that are not the white sugar, not the perfect, things that are not perfect, and just to sit and just tolerate, so that maybe Ruby should learn not to be so comfortable, right? And if she could learn to just live in a world where things are not so perfect and not so ideal and just kind of like suffer it, she might actually develop maybe what she never developed as a young person, which is like the integrity to hold things that are not perfect, and that way she could get the shock absorbers that she's never had, and also integrate maybe the parts of herself that, like, she's so disgusted by her own sadism that her sadism is not even a part of her. But if she could bring the sadism in and say, yeah, man, I'm a tough motherfucker. I'm bad. I'm mad. I'm mean. I can hurt people. If it's really in her, it's in a way, if it's even more exaggerated, she can almost sort of catch herself and sort of be aware of it so she can control it. So, in a sense, I think it's almost too bad that with this plea deal and with this strategy towards, I think, early parole, I think basically the defense is sort of taking away from Ruby the chance to really look into herself and maybe take a little more seriously, maybe how sick she really is, But obviously, the defense is going to enable her because their job is just to get her the least amount of exposure. And so in the end, I don't know who's going to help Ruby really find, I say, the real truth. The real truth is that life is not so perfect, and that for a lot of people, especially people with narcissistic issues, I think the only way to get better is to learn how to hold more ugly, incompatible things, and sort of to sort of like put dampen out that tendency to hide in the ideal, and basically to learn to accept more mess and chaos and imperfection, and just hold that discomfort, that exact discomfort that she was pointing at with the teacher when she wanted to withhold food from her child. But anyway, so we'll see what happens, but my prediction is that she'll be out sooner than we think on parole. I don't know how soon, maybe 3-4 years. I don't know, or maybe even sooner, But the other thing to remember is the judge is not bound by any party stipulation as to consecutive sentences. So anyway, really appreciate your patience, and thanks for watching.